music from the movie Where Eagles Dare, coming at you live from a broom closet deep, deep in the Crescent City. My name is Jason, and this is the much anticipated Hexes and Soldiers episode 12, which makes it an official Dirty Dozen. And if you have a bottle of champagne nearby, let the cork fly. Shout outs. I would like to give a particular shout out to a gentleman who has done much on his part to help the industry, and that would be Kev Sharp from Big Board. The guy is posting things left and right and has hosted a couple of times I believe, Google Hangout for people to get together and discuss their like-minded passions. And though I missed that, I plan to join at some point. So yeah, thank you, Kev, for all your help and effort there. I'd like to give a shout out to any newbies out there who are just sticking a toe in the wargaming waters. Feel free to submerge your entire foot, and after that, your full body, because once you take the plunge, you will gladly and never look back and be happy you did it. So thanks, and again, anybody that wishes to subscribe, please do so, as you will make my week. And also, the thumbs are there for a reason. Click them up or click them down, but click them either way, and I will appreciate that. So, what's new? I've been getting settled in here in my new digs, and initially set up a nice 4 foot by 2 foot game table in front of the shelves of games in the bedroom, which would have served me well enough. You know, you can't really play any giant Case Blue campaign games or anything, but there's plenty of space, friendly scenarios, and games to be enjoyed, so I should do just fine. And I most recently secretly added another foot to that gaming table, so it is now officially a 4 foot by 3 foot table, and hopefully my esteemed associate will not notice that. What else? Winter Olympics are right around the corner, which means for a lot of you, shows will get canceled, and but for some of us, that's good because that means more hockey, and I think the Blues need a break as they got blown out in New Jersey 7-2, lost to Ottawa just last night in a shootout, a game that should have easily been won, but I don't know, maybe it's midseason burnout or something. Either way, in case you didn't know, I have added a new blog, and that shall be henceforth known as hexesandsoldiers.blogspot.com, all lowercase. If you haven't checked that out yet, I encourage you to do so. You will read the mission statement there as to the purpose of that blog, and obviously check back and forth between this podcast on YouTube and that blog, as the two will coincide. I also have a new email up for any rants or any letters/mail, and I will be inclined to read mail in future shows. So you might get lucky and get something you send read on the air. Send your rants to hexesandsoldiers@gmx.com, all lowercase. As far as news and reviews go, not too much going on. Shenandoah Studio released Drive on Moscow for the iPhone, which is great for me because I don't have an iPad, but I do have an iPhone. And I've been playing that thing, and I haven't conquered Moscow, but I've come close. And in fact, as in a related topic, if you go to Consum World, somebody has put up an article entitled How I Conquered Russia on My iPad, and it talks about just that, the drive on Moscow. Also, you have Joel Toppin, who is an old wargamer hand, has a marketplace up on Facebook, and I found this out mistakenly through another podcast. But if you go to Facebook, it is entitled just that, I believe, Wargamers Marketplace. But anyway, it's a way to circumvent eBay, which I don't know. There's problems, especially with selling, with fees and whatnot. But give it a shot, and people post things, and you can post stuff you are interested in, something you're selling, that is to say, or something that you're interested in buying. My first post was a request for a Hecapale if anybody has a copy lying around. And hopefully somebody at M&P will see that and get the joke and get on the wagon with that thing because it is high time it came out. I know you guys have other things going on, but this thing cannot continue to keep getting pushed to the back burner. I don't know how many back burners you guys have on your stove at M&P, but it's like 50 or 60 burners back on that thing. So let's get that pulled forward. And then I've compiled for you top 10 market garden games, and those would be starting from the bottom up. We'll start with number 10, Screaming Eagles in Holland. M&P title. I believe that was a Gamers thing originally. It came out in 2002. Designed by Nigel Roberts and Bob Runnacles. I do not own that. I have not played it. Perhaps somebody else who is more familiar with that game could, at the bottom of this podcast, write a little something about it. Is it worth getting? Is it worth selling? Number 9, Target Arnhem Across Six Bridges. Another M&P title, and you're going to notice M&P kind of has the drop on these games. To come out in 2005 by Tetsuya Nakamura and Jun Tajima. That would be the International Gamers Series, obviously. And I believe Adam Starkweather oversees that stuff. Again, I do not own that. I have not played it. I know little to nothing about it. Number 8, Arnhem Defiant Stand. 2003 release. Advanced Tobruk system, I believe, and I have yet to fully comprehend the purpose of Advanced Tobruk system. It is my understanding that it is a squad leader-esque tactical rules series. I haven't played it. Perhaps would explain why I don't understand it. But if you have something like ASL, why do you need ATS? But again, I haven't played it, so I don't know what I'm missing. Number 7, just plain old Arnhem. That would be the SPI title from 1976 by Jay Nelson. And I believe that's from the original 4, they call it the Quadra game series, West Wall game series. And the best of the 4 that came in that game, obviously, Arnhem. That is one that I do own, one that I have played, and one that I plan to give an after-action report shortly. Number 6, Monty's Gamble, Market Garden. M&P release, 2003, Michael Ranella. I do own that. Plan to play it, have not done so yet. An area movement market garden game, which I'm a big fan of the area movement system, so that should be quite enjoyable. Halfway up the list to number 5, It Never Snows. Guess what? Another M&P title, 2012, Dean Essig. And, all these games are on my shelves in the bedroom. I have no choice in the matter, nowhere else to put them. But my girlfriend's laying in there one night and taking a nap or something to that effect. And randomly I hear her call from the room to the living room where I'm at. You have a game called It Never Snows. And apparently this just fascinated her, the title. And I gave her a brief rundown behind that title and what it entailed, but I think it didn't help. She was just baffled that there could be anything named such a title. Number 4, Hell's Highway. Old Victory Games, 1983. The John Butterfield. And I own that as well as It Never Snows. Both fantastic games. It Never Snows big dumb monster, as you would call it, Hell's Highway, a small smart monster, you might call that. Number 3, Where Eagles Dare, and I'll give you one guess, MMP, Adam Starkweather, 2011. The sister half to his ginormous Market Garden game, the other half, which we will get to shortly, Storm over Arnhem. Number 2, Avalon Hill, 1981. Courtney Allen came up with this puppy. It was the first area impulse game by Avalon Hill, and a game that kicked off a lot of other wonderful games in the series. I think prior to this, you basically just had hexes. And Mr. Allen said, I can do away with that. I can do better. Number 1, and finally, The Devil's Cauldron, MMP, 2008. Mr. Adam Starkweather, job well done. I think this is the second time Adam's made it to the top of a top 10 list. So he is held in high regard in this realm. Yeah, Devil's Cauldron, if you don't know, find out, ask a friend, go to Board Game Geek, look at the thing, read about it, order it, play it, fall in love all over again with wargaming. This thing has no limits, knows no bounds. I can't say enough good things about it. I'll just start repeating myself, but my lord, if you don't have this game and you say, oh, well, it's too expensive, I can't get it, it's out of print, that's crap, and here's why. Because you're buying a bunch of little things. You're buying a $13 magazine here. You're buying a $25 game here, another $25 game there. What else? You're buying stuff you don't need. How many Red Bulls a week do you buy? Cut all that crap out for a month. How much money do you think you're going to have? You smoke cigarettes? Stop smoking for a month. This is worth it. You're going to live longer, and you're going to have a hell of a game. So all that junk that you spend money on, nickel and diming you, just cut it out for a month, save that money, set it aside, and you're going to have probably close to what this thing runs, and you'll be able to get it. So no more excuses. Get that game. It is well worth having. And as far as the after action reports, I do have one. It was the inaugural game, or the first game that I will have played here in New Orleans. A Bridge Too Far from the Arnhem Collector's Edition, Boxed Edition, Mounted Map Boards, SPI. Best of the 4 games from the West Wall series, as stated earlier. 1976, Jay Nelson and Redmond Simonson. You're looking at a decent box, nice artwork. Mounted map boards, as I stated, and they're a little simplistic in design, but don't let that dissuade you from anything. The counters as well are simple in their premise, nothing on the back, a basic kernel of information on the front, 4 pages of standard rules, and a little less than 3 pages of exclusive rules. Your historical scenario is going to run you for 10 turns with reinforcements hopping in throughout the game. The Allies get 1 victory point for each German unit eliminated and can win a decisive victory if they can get ground units north of the Vaal River. A complete and total victory would require the Allies to push north of the river Niederrhein. So the Germans get 5 victory points for every eliminated Allied unit and 3 victory points for each Allied unit that is unable to trace a line of communications, or supply line in other words. And right off the bat, from the start of the game, it shows its age, obviously, with basic rules and mechanics, and some of which seem rather archaic, to say the least. Combat, for instance, requires a unit, and this took me a bit to get used to, requires a unit that is adjacent to 1 or more units to attack each adjacent unit. So you can't just attack one, you have to attack them all. And the combat results table reflects this, as the final sum that you use to determine your odds column can be in the negative if you are stuck attacking more defenders than you have attackers. And the Allies quickly rack up German casualties in this game. At least that was my experience. But we're pretty much unable to maneuver northwards in a sufficient amount of time. And the airborne units were somewhat limited in what they could do, as each group could move no further than 7 hexes away from its drop zone, and can only move 3 hexes their first turn of entry. So they're pretty limited in what they can do. Allied ground units received a variable amount of abstract ground support each turn, which helps from time to time, and artillery helped out a lot, both offensively and defensively. And but really, the highlight of the game for me was and this might sound trivial, but the unpredictable blowing of various bridges across the map. And the way this works is each time an allied unit comes adjacent to a particular bridge, it doesn't matter what you're doing, immediately the Germans roll a die, which, okay, in the rules it states randomizer. They don't call it a die, they call it a randomizer. And I just picture a boardroom with SPI suits sitting around trying to decide what they can call this six-sided thing. And hours go by, they're now pulling overtime, and a guy finally says randomizer. And I think, wow, really? Okay, but anyway, a particular bridge gets blown if the Germans roll a 1 or a 2 on a six-sided die, which in the future means your single Allied engineer unit can repair it, but he has to spend the entire turn adjacent to that blown bridge, and can't be impeded by the Germans during that time. If the Germans roll for a bridge to be blown and it doesn't blow, then they've lost the ability to blow that bridge for the rest of the game. In the end, with 12 destroyed German units, and I think I only had like 2 or 3 destroyed Allied units, I failed to reach the Val. I couldn't even get close to it. The Germans had racked up too many victory points, due mainly to cutting off various Allied units from their line of communications. So basically, the Allies were doomed. And I pretty much personified myself as the British, so I feel like I lost, even though I was played against myself. But again, and I've stated this before, when you're the attacker, there's something about it. It just seems easier to sit back and see what the attacker's going to do as a defender and then act, or should I say react. It's easier to react than to act. So in conclusion, the grand scope of the game for me was rewarding, and though I tend to play my games alone, as I stated, this one being no exception, I can only imagine the competitive and nail-biting that would go on in a head-to-head match. So my official recommendation is, if you are into Market Garden, if you're nostalgic when it comes to 3M titles, and when I say 3M, it's an SPI title, but 3M meaning musty, moldy, and mildewy, get this and bribe a friend into playing it with you. Blackmail them if you have to. Neither of you will be sorry. So, regarding Market Garden, which is what this podcast obviously will focus on, you've got some things you can read. Now, go into them more in depth as the show goes on, but you got at least a couple of books. A Bridge Too Far by Cornelius Ryan, and It Never Snows in September, The German View of Market Garden and the Battle of Arnhem, September 1944 by Robert Kershaw. Both fantastic books. As I said a second ago, I'll go more into those as the show goes on. You've also got a little film there, 1977, A Bridge Too Far with Sean Connery, among other notables. And a little trivia factoid for you. The real-life Colonel John Frost chided Anthony Hopkins during the filming for running from house to house during the battle for Arnhem. According to Hopkins, Frost told him that a British officer would never have run, but would have shown disdain for enemy fire by walking from place to place. And Hopkins claims he tried, but as soon as the firing started, instincts took over and he ran as fast as he could. That's funny. So that's that. And without further ado, I'll hop right into the meat of the matter and go from there. So regarding Operation Market Garden and specifically the Battle of Arnhem, I'm going to hopefully correctly assume that most of you who are listening to this already have a working knowledge of the events and details that led up to this operation, and so I won't obviously, for time purposes, be able to go into every single detail and everything that led up to it. But I will start by giving a date, and we're looking at around mid-September of 44. And Operation Market Garden is, well, will turn out to be the largest airborne operation ever launched in history. And Montgomery thought this operation would end the war in 44. Uh, Eisenhower disagreed, as did a number of his underlings. Nevertheless, the main objective was for airborne troops to take and hold three main bridges over the Rhine Delta in Holland. Now, Monty failed to capture Antwerp, and this is a problem because there was only one supply port in Cherbourg, and Patton was feeding off of this at the moment. So, what they decided to do was hold Patton up so that they could feed Operation Market Garden with fuel and supplies, and simply because there wasn't enough fuel to do both. So, in my opinion, right off the bat, maybe this operation shouldn't even taken place. Patton was doing fine. All they had to do was let him keep steamrolling through. Um, Seemed like a sure thing, but you've got all these generals chomping at the bit to gain fame and glory, and I guess in the end that won out. So, as far as opposition, or I should say expected opposition, it's hard to say exactly what they expected to run into. At least from what I've read, there was foreknowledge of two SS Panzer divisions, and that being the 10th and the 9th, hanging out. And obviously, this didn't cause a great concern as it prevented nothing. And the planners decided that this wouldn't be a problem and that they'd be swept away in the early part of the operation, which you can attribute again, and you've seen this before with the Allies, and underestimating the Germans and being overconfident. So these people planning this decided it was a go regardless. You could have said the Germans had an atomic bomb and we're going to set it off, but it seems like Montgomery was just hell bent on doing this, and he'd have done it anyway. So it was a go from the start. And as I said, overly ambitious, overly confident generals thrown in the mix does not make for necessarily logical or rational decisions. You've got generals boasting about Christmas in Berlin in 44. You've got one guy saying he's going to bring his golf clubs because he just thinks it's going to be a walk in the park. Stuff like that. And it's just, you'd think they would have learned before now not to underestimate, but no, they don't. Then you have the troops that are supposed to relieve the airborne troops in Arnhem about 60 miles away. And what they have to do is cross narrow causeways in flat dike country, and you pretty much got to stay on these narrow roads. You can't effectively go cross country because your tanks are going to get stuck and things like that. It's all like watery canals and things. But so basically, it's kind of like the hedgerow stuff. And if you knock out a single tank, you're going to hold up a whole column, and that presents a challenge in and of itself. And then as far as the paratroopers, who are typically lightly equipped, they did have 7-pounder anti-tank guns, the handheld Piats mortars, so they could fend off small, limited armored assaults, and in fact they do so, I believe, on the second day in Arnhem as German armor unit attempts to cross a bridge. So they have some stuff to hold off an attack, but they really have limited ammo. They can only hold out so long. They're not meant to sit for days and just present themselves as a blocking unit. They really need to be relieved. And what you're dealing with now is a column that's coming to relieve the paratroopers, and four tanks cross the second to the last bridge before Arnhem. They only have to go 8 or so more miles, roughly 20 minutes, to relieve the paratroopers who are desperately holding out in Arnhem, but get stopped at Lint. And Lord Carrington is in one of these tanks, and he's going to get confronted by an American named Moffat Berries. And this is, I don't know how accurately, but this is portrayed in the movie Bridge Too Far. And it's the little part where he orders the column to move forward. Why are you stopped? But they refuse to do so, and Carrington says his orders are to wait for the infantry, and which meets with the reply, must you do everything by the book? So, as it turns out, this conversation is based on historical fact and did actually take place with a gentleman whose name I mentioned already, Moffat Berries. And this guy is from the 3rd Battalion, 504th Parachute Regiment, in command of I Company. And he had suffered about 50% casualties in the crossing of the River Vaal. So this guy is probably in a bad mood already, and he's on his way to Arnhem and sees this armored column basically stopped. Only four tanks have made it across the bridge. There's roughly 60 tanks total that could be rolling forward. And also prior to this, Herrick was told, or has told the paratroopers ahead of time, we'll be there. We'll be there in full force. You got nothing to worry about. Nothing is going to stop us. We will be there. And here they are stopped, and as it turns out, because of a single German gun, which has knocked out the lead tank. So Carrington holds up the advance, and Moffat says, what's the holdup? To which the reply is, there's a German gun up there. We're going to get chewed up. We need to hold up and wait for the infantry. And Moffat says, well, we'll go up there with you, and we'll take care of the gun. Just get moving. But Carrington doesn't budge, and he isn't going to do anything without orders. And Moffat says, well, I'm giving you orders. But Carrington says, I can only take orders from my British commander. So Moffat states that he put a gun to Carrington's head and tells him to move. And what Carrington does is retires into the tank, closes the hatch, and remains there the rest of the night. Doesn't do a damn thing. So there's Carrington sitting there doing nothing, and much to the chagrin of Moffat. Um, One of the books worth reading, and there are a couple. But you've got, of course, Cornelius Ryan's A Bridge Too Far. But you also have a book by Mr. Robert Kershaw called It Never Snows in September, from which M&P has a game in the standard combat series called It Never Snows. And I can only guess that they got this title from the book, huh? But Mr. Kershaw in his book you get the sense that he kind of slights Cornelius Ryan because he says that Ryan employed a ton of researchers to gather data, and I guess that's not necessarily bad in and of itself, but he also goes on to address this kind of myth that evolves out of that book. And with It Never Snows, you have German accounts, German perspective of what was going on, and I guess a lot of new things came to light. But if you haven't read that, give it a shot. It's definitely worth a read. For those of you that haven't read Cornelius Ryan's book, obviously do so. But those of you that had and feel like reading yet another book on Market Garden and specifically Arnhem, It Never Snows in September is what you want. But also regarding the movie A Bridge Too Far, and I'll talk just for a second about this. The director, Joseph Levine, stated, because somebody had approached him and called him out on historical accuracy, I think one of the technical advisors who was in the military, and he stated, the director says, I make films for money, not for history. So at least the guy was honest. But some of the characters we're dealing with during this battle are colorful to say the least, and I'll just go over a couple. You've got Colonel Frost himself, who is portrayed in the movie, and he's the one as asked when asked for surrender terms, replies that he didn't have facilities for all the German prisoners. Obviously, this is comical because it's the British who are getting their butts handed to them, and this kind of smacks of the nuts statement that is given in Battle of the Bulge. You also have the guy who was carrying the umbrella in the movie is based on an actual person who did carry an umbrella, and that would be Major Digby Tatham Warder. Carried around an umbrella because he said it was the only way he could remember the damn password. During the battle, one particular instance, Father Egan, the battalion padre, is trying to cross to a building on the other side of the street to visit the wounded in a cellar. And he makes an attempt to move over, but's forced to seek shelter from intense mortar fire from the Germans. And he notices this Digby character just casually approaching him, lackadaisically, not a care in the world. And the major opens his old and battered umbrella and holds it over Egan's head, beckoning him, "Come on, Padre." And Egan drew Tatham Water's attention to all the mortars exploding everywhere, to which came the reply, "Don't worry, I've got an umbrella." So, colorful characters to say the least, and that's just a couple of them. But to go back to what Kershaw was saying in his book, and this book came about because I think somebody approached him and wanted him to compile something for all the Arnhem vets, and he wanted to at least initially gather some information from the German side. And what ended up happening was he got a plethora of information from German vets, letters, diaries, accounts, all kinds of stuff, and turned it into this book that he wrote. But he states that the Allies were eager to put forth the final blow, as it were, and the British airborne were just itching for a fight. So, by way of where was the fire at? Why was this operation expedited, or one could ask, executed at all? So, regarding confirmation of German forces on the ground, yeah, it was thought that they'd just simply be swept aside. But basically, Kershaw's premise was that the plan could have worked, which is interesting. I don't know how many historians or authors feel that way, perhaps more than I'm aware of, but in the end, he says Operation Market Garden could have worked, and when you study it, it seems like it could have worked if 30 Corps hadn't stopped for 17 hours. And when you consider that, yeah, then it seems like it could have worked. Well, Kershaw interviews this guy, Harmel, which is Heinz Harmel, from the 10th Panzer Division. And he's a German veteran that fought there. And according to him, a simple armored infantry group could have pushed on with relative ease into Arnhem. And as there was little to interfere with them between Nijmegen and Arnhem. And basically, there was only a couple companies of infantry, and that was primarily in the village of Elst, which ASL has a historical starter kit scenario based on and coming out soon. But Harmel says the British stopped for tea. And what he means by that is, yeah, if they hadn't stopped, they could have pushed on probably unscathed, and the whole operation would have succeeded. And he doesn't understand why they stopped. So, um, it was Colonel Frost's battalion, if we can go back to Arnhem in particular. It was Colonel Frost's battalion that made it to Arnhem. And it was his guys that destroyed an armor assault that tried to cross the bridge on the second day. And they're holding out in various houses and buildings, running low on ammo. And as you read about this stuff, you get kind of, what's the word? You get kind of flashbacks of Stalingrad. Obviously, not quite to that extent. But we are talking about bitter house to house, and then in some cases, room to room fighting. And you read about guys making mouse holes through walls to get where they need to go, because if you go out in the street or in a yard, you're going to get popped by a sniper or mortar fire or who knows what. And to take an account from Frost himself, and there's a number of things that he wrote regarding the battle that was going on. He says movement from one building to another was strictly limited. For to cross the street in daylight was to draw fire from the Germans, and at night, the indiscriminate attention of both friend and foe. The fires from burning buildings lit up the whole area so that there was no real darkness. I managed to visit all our positions to the west of the bridge and the ramp leading up to it. But to move under the bridge to see people on the eastern side was suicidal. And there was no way we could support our people east of the bridge except that the gunner OP on the roof of the headquarters building could bring some defensive fire to bear. So then you have a gentleman named, his Major Hibbett, and this is a gentleman from the British 1st Airborne. Frost gets wounded, and Hibbett replaces him. But he stated later that if only one battalion or a company from each battalion moving up to relieve Arnhem was sent down a Lion route, that they would not meet any opposition. To which he tells this to Brigadier Lasby and says, if you come up through Lion route, you can help us out. You're not going to run into any enemy opposition. But this guy says, no, I've decided we are in contact with the enemy and not really well organized at the moment. And goes on to state that our troops are too tired, but we will attempt an approach in the morning. So, what the hell's going on here? You got guys literally getting shot to shit. They're running out of ammunition. They're not going to be able to hold out for much longer. And Lord Carrington's sipping tea, and this other guy has decided he's taken enough fire. He's just going to sit it out. It's just ridiculous. And if only he could have convinced his divisional commander to move, things would have ended up a lot different and for the better, to say the least. So then you get a ceasefire that occurs around 7 p.m. for about 3 hours after a couple of days. So the Brits can evacuate the wounded and consolidate themselves and kind of lick their wounds, as it were. And while this is happening, the Germans, who seemed only all too willing to accommodate this request, are in fact infiltrating the British positions. So that by 10 p.m., which I think this was like a 3-hour lull, the Brits discover that they're completely overwhelmed and their lines are overrun. Frost is holed up in a building. Doesn't seem like he's going to get help. And the Germans are pounding the hell out of this building. And he hears shouts from above. Don't shoot. Only wounded are here, he writes. And George Murray suddenly appears, wanting to know what on earth was happening. Scarcely had he gone when I heard German voices in the passage outside and the sounds of the stretcher cases being moved out. Then Wicks came in. He said he's going to stay with me till they took me out, and I was very glad to see him. He went away to get a stretcher, but while he was gone, a German NCO rushed in, intimating that we must get out as soon as possible. With the help of one of the bomb-happy cases, he dragged me up the stairs to the door. I sat down among the stretcher cases on the embankment leading to the bridge. Both sides labored together to bring the wounded out, and I saw that the Germans were driving off in our jeeps full of bandaged men. The prisoners we had taken were standing in a group nearby, not seemingly overjoyed at their liberation. Wicks found me again and put me on a stretcher, at the same time moving me alongside Doug Crawley, as one of the orderlies was giving me an injection of morphine for the journey. The SS men were very polite and complimentary about the battle we had fought, but the bitterness I felt was unassuaged. No living enemy had beaten us. The battalion was unbeaten yet, but they could not have much chance with no ammunition, no rest, and with no positions from which to fight. No body of men could have fought more courageously and tenaciously than the officers and men of the 1st Parachute Brigade at Arnhem Bridge. Sounds like a lot of hoopla, but if you lived through something like that, you might tend to pat yourself on the back once or twice. I remember saying to Douglas, "Well, Doug, I'm afraid we haven't gotten away with it this time." "No, sir," he replied, "but we gave 'em a damn good run for their money." We still could not believe the 30 Corps would fail to come to our rescue. It was difficult to feel that there was enough genuine opposition to stop them. It was desperately disappointing that, having done everything we had been asked to do, We were now prisoners. It was shaming, like being a malefactor and no longer free. For the moment, all this was alleviated by the sympathy and even admiration of our captors. I could remember saying to someone when it did seem inevitable that we would fall into the hands of Hitler's SS, "I don't think that this is going to be much of a pleasure." We had all heard stories of them shooting their prisoners or herding them into burning buildings, but these men were kind, chivalrous, and even comforting. So who's at fault here? What's really going on? Uh, Number of theories, and as I stated already, 30 core sitting on their ass for 17 hours. You got another column that has decided that they have in fact run into German opposition and they're tired, so they're not going to do anything until the morning. You even got some people that point the finger at 82nd Airborne and state that they didn't do their job in taking Nijmegen Bridge, and if they had done their job at D-Day, the crossing wouldn't even have been necessary, and a bunch of other bullshit. But the point is, regarding that, opposition at Nijmegen was actually fairly strong, and you had roughly half of the 82nd dealing with Groesbeck Heights. So they had their hands full. They didn't have like imaginary German opposition. They weren't waiting for infantry to back them up and orders from the top to do anything. They were doing. So one problem you could look at, and this is in the planning, or I guess something you can't account for really, the weather, and you have roughly only half of the airborne troops that were intended to be dropped get dropped at Market Garden due to weather. And by the time the other half are dropped, it's after the fact. It's too late. So one can only surmise what might have happened if the full brunt of the intended force had been dropped. And with what was dropped initially, at least, where we get the title "It Never Snows" is there's so many parachutes coming down on the Germans. The one guy states, "Is that snow?" And the other guy says, "It never snows in September," and they realize that they're under attack. But Kershaw, the author of "It Never Snows," says that even if the paratroopers were relieved, it wouldn't have mattered because 30 Corps wouldn't have been able to exploit their advance once they got there. And this might be plausible if you consider that roughly three different times now, um, since the start of the operation, the Germans did in fact breach their supply lines for significant amounts of time. But I don't know if that theory really holds up because you don't just have 30 core. You've got 30 core, right? Well, you also have two other core, 8th Corps and 12th Corps. And once 30 Corps got there, it's not like they would have been the only ones hanging out. 8th and 12th would have come around the flanks and helped them out. So there's that. And then in the end, basically, what you got is German resistance was just simply underestimated. Yes, the 30 Corps sitting there for 17 hours doing nothing fouled things up, to put it nicely. But you also have to hand it to the Germans and kick the Allies in the pants for, again, overestimating themselves and underestimating the Germans. And I read that even Monty himself, early on in the operation, began to lose faith quickly in the success of it, as he witnessed stiff German resistance right from the outset. So, when the Brits announced they would advance into Germany over a carpet of airborne troops, uh, a gentleman asked, "Would that be a carpet of alive or dead airborne troops?" And certainly that was an ominous forecast. So that's Market Garden in a nutshell, at least historically speaking. And as far as games related to this, there are a number of games, but it would be interesting to determine specifically how some of these games factor in the 30 core pause. So I'll conclude there and didn't do the normal tie in with the history and games in depth that I normally do, but hopefully this will whet your appetite and prompt you to play more Market Garden and specifically Arnhem games. And as far as this being episode 12, I thought I would throw this out there and say that um, a lot of publishing companies are doing their P500 when it comes to placing orders, and I thought I would do a P5. So, to celebrate the official 12th episode of Hexes and Soldiers, I've decided to have you guys, anybody that is interested, um, email me and let me know if you would be interested in a t-shirt. And if I get up to 5 people interested, I will look into getting these things made, and this will have the soldier's silhouette in front of the flag background that precedes each episode in the beginning of the podcast on a white tee. And just let me know if you're interested. Send an email and add your name and your shirt size. And if I get 5 of you interested in these things, I will place the order. And I know of one person already that's interested, in addition to myself. Um, I will place the order, and the first person that expresses an interest via official email will get his shirt free. The rest of you will merely be charged cost. I'm not trying to make money off of this. So if that's something that interests you, let me know. We'll see how that goes. Just send me an email at hexesandsoldiers@gmx.com, all lowercase. With that, I'll call this a day and say, as usual, thanks for listening and keep gaming.